Hi, it's Lisa here from Soul to Soul Yoga. I'm going to make you my favorite Sunday nut roast recipe. I make this for the whole family because even if some of them eat meat, we can use this as a side for stuffing, and it's really delicious. There's some really good recipes online, but I like to kind of zhuzh it up and make it my own with a lot of taste and flavor. I'm also going to make double the quantity today because you can freeze nut roast, so it's really good to have if you've got a big enough freezer to freeze a spare one, or to chop it into individual portions, and then you can just freeze those individually, so you've always got a piece of something to go with your dinner, really quick and easy. But this isn't a complicated recipe. Now, here I have two medium white onions. There's about 3 sticks of celery and about 7 or 8 large cloves of garlic. And I'm going to use the blender today because I'm going to use it for the nuts and the breadcrumbs anyway. So otherwise you could just chop these up finely and use them. Now, I have a bit of an issue with my blender in that there's something that snapped off, but we have a fix. So before I actually go and I'll try and get a spare part, you can actually press down. So I'm just going to press down and blend. So rather than obviously just use your blender, your food processor as you need to. But there's something that's just snapped off there that obviously presses down there that must have snapped off without knowing. These things happen. Okay, so we have a fine blend now of onions and garlic and celery. And I'm just going to pop that into a bowl to take over to the stove. I like to get everything ready before I cook, but obviously you can prepare as you go. Whew, those onions are pungent. So we're going to go over to the oven, over to the stove top, and I'm going to start to fry the onion, celery, and garlic mixture with some oil. Pop some oil in the pot. Okay, just let that get warm, la la la. And then we're going to just fry the onions and garlic off until they're soft. What you want to try and do is allow them to go a little bit soft and brown. So just a little bit caramelized so that they take on a bit more sweetness. And that's really nice for most recipes. But you don't have to worry about cooking them too much because they are going to be cooked again in the nut roast recipe in the oven. So I'm just going to let that mixture, the onion, celery, and garlic mixture, just cook down. I always like to season as I go, so a little bit of salt, not a lot, because we are going to use some salty ingredients as we move forward. A little bit of pepper, and I'm just going to place this down onto just a medium heat, not stirring too often, just as I need to. And we'll come back to stage 2. So follow me round. I'm going to prepare for stage 2 while I just leave these just to simmer away for a little bit. Okay, so stage 2 is prepare the nut mixture. So again, we're going to have our trusty, our trusty or untrusty food processor. We're going to make nuts. The nuts we're going to prepare in the food processor. Again, you could chop by hand. There's 550 grams of nuts here, mixed nuts. So I've got walnuts, Brazils, almonds, cashews. You could use anything. You could use peanuts. You could use just whatever you've got. I like a good mixture because nuts are so good for you, and it's good to have a diverse amount of different nuts and seeds in your diet as well as other things. I'm just going to pop those into the blender. And again, pop the lid on. Use my trusty spoon to press down on the button, but just blend as normal. You probably just want to, I don't want these to be too fine. I want to have some nice lumps. So I'm just going to kind of force, give it a bit of a blitz. So you have got some that are more fine than others, some that are actually still whole. That's going to be really nice. So, and again, you could chop by hand, but you know, I'm all for making things nice and easy. Next is the breadcrumb mixture. So we want about, I think it's about 100 grams of breadcrumbs. So I'm doubling that up. So 200 grams, which is about 4 pieces of bread, like sliced bread. But obviously you could use homemade bread. I'm using wholemeal. You could use white. And just going to pop that in, and again, pop the lid on. And here you do want to get it quite fine, so push it up. Give it a good blitz up until we have a nice fine breadcrumb. That's going to help to bind the mixture. Okay, and as you can see, that's all the breadcrumb mixture now. Pop that in with the nuts. Nice and easy. Now we've got herbs, so there's a couple of bay leaves. These are all from my garden. You could use dried herbs, I guess. You could skip the herbs, but I like plenty of herbs. I want this really tasty. Alexa, stop timer. So I'm going to chop these finely. I have growing in my garden and loads of different types. So what have I got here? I've got thyme. I have some oregano, some rosemary, some sage, as I said, bay. You could use marjoram. So the Mediterranean type herbs really would be good, but whatever you like really. Okay, and I'm not too fussed about them being too fine, so I'm going to chop those up and pop those in there. What I also have here, which I'm not going to add yet, is this gloopy mixture, as you can see, which is to bind, is linseed egg. So it's just ground linseeds, and there's about 3 or 4 tablespoons of ground linseeds with hot water, and it makes like an egg mixture, which is going to be bind instead of an egg. Obviously, if you eat eggs, you could use eggs. So now we're going to come back over to the stove and into stage 2. So as you can see, these are starting to soften down. If I wasn't doing a video on this, I might leave these a little bit longer, but I think they'll be fine because, as I said, they're going to cook a bit more in a minute. Now, to this mixture, I'm going to add lots of flavour and lots of taste. So you want to add a good squirt. This is where you go freestyle, a little bit random. Whatever you've got in your cupboard that goes, but I've got a plethora of ingredients here. I'm going to use some tomato puree from the tub like this, a good squib. Now, I think it's really good to cook your tomato puree. If you actually just blob it in, it's fine. But when you actually cook down some of these flavours that I'm going to put in, it makes everything much richer and more integrated. So if you cook your tomato puree like this in the onions, with a recipe like this or with curries or whatever, it's going to be so much nicer, in my opinion. But, you just do what you need to. Okay, so what I don't have is red wine open. So that's white wine. I'm not going to use wine today, but I might use red wine otherwise, a splash of red wine. What I am going to use, let that cook down again just for another little while, is a good balsamic vinegar. You could use a cheapy one, but a good one is going to make all the difference. And it's not cheap, this good balsamic, but it's so good. It's so nice. It's worth indulging. So a good little tablespoon or so of that. I'm going to pop a little bit of soy sauce in, just a teaspoon, a blob of, maybe a tablespoon of brown sauce, favourite, in Kona, chilli sauce, again about a teaspoon to taste. You can always add a little bit more. A good squirt of red sauce. These are all wonderful umami flavours, which is that real kind of savoury richness that we like in our food. Give it a little stir again cooking down all of those wonderful flavours. I'm going to add a little bit of mustard. So again, maybe a scant teaspoon because it's quite fiery. And I'm going to add Marmite. So this is like 4 tablespoons of Marmite. I've left it in the jar and then just put some hot water to make a mix. So I'm going to let that cook down for a moment more. You can see how rich it's becoming now. And I'm going to add that to the mixture and get any last bits. And Marmite's really savoury flavour. So even if you don't like it on your toast, you don't have to use it again. You could just skip that if you prefer. We have our egg here, our linseed egg, which I'm going to pour in, which is, again, just linseeds, ground linseeds with water. You could use flour. Chickpea flour is good. or self-raising flour, corn flour to make a kind of, but linseeds is really good. It does actually really bind ingredients, and they're really nutritious as well. So linseeds have lots of omega goodness in there. Okay, cracked black pepper, give it a good. So we've got quite a moist mixture now, and you could cook this down for a little longer if you wished. Thank you. Now we have our nuts, herb and breadcrumb mixture. So I'm going to turn the stovetop down a little bit and pour all this in. And we're going to give it a good stir around until it's all incorporated. You could use things like ground almonds in here to thicken as well. You could use different nuts, but I always have big bags of nuts in my cupboard because they're so good for you and so delicious. A really good source of protein and fat, especially if you don't eat meat. And yeah, everyone loves nuts, don't they? Okay, so take a little look at that, please, cameraman. So as you can see, that's already looking, for me, that's looking and smelling really good. I'm going to take a little taste of the, I just want to try and have a little bit of the, yum yum. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that's all nicely incorporated, and come back to me. We're going to leave this just to cook. Just stir it for a couple of minutes on the top till everything's incorporated. Okay, that's enough of that. So now to the next stage. Follow me. And I've only prepared one of my tubs, so I will show you. We're going to use like a loaf tin like this, and I guess you don't have to line it, but it's a lot easier if you line it because you can just lift it out and it doesn't stick. So I've just lined it with some baking powder, and I'm going to just spoon it in. Nothing to it. I'm going to make sure that each one has a bay leaf because I've got two, as you know. So I'm just going to spoon it in to the loaf and then press it down so it's nice and compact. And really, that is it. Now, all I'm going to do is put it in the oven for probably on a medium oven, about 200 degrees, for about 25-30 minutes to cook, and the top should brown nicely. Take it out, let it cool, slice it, have it with your dinner. As I said, you can have it as a side or a main dish. Going to then freeze another one, which you can just kind of individually portion, put them in the freezer. And really, that's all there is to it. So come back to me in a minute when we see the finished result. So the nut roast has been in for about 35 minutes now. Really just, you want it golden on top. If you're going to reheat it, obviously you could do it a little bit less, or if you're going to freeze it, do it a little bit less because you're going to want to reheat it again, you know, put about 20 minutes in the oven. But let's have a look. Okay. So as you can see, nice and golden on top. You can see some of the lovely nuts, and it's firm to the touch. You want to let this go cold, so I'm going to pop this onto a wire tray to cool, and then when it's cool I can take it out and slice it and use as you wish. Obviously if you want to eat it warm, you're still going to want to let it cool down a bit, and that will just help it to kind of all hold together better. So I hope you enjoyed. Let us know what you think, and if you try it, namaste.